Hello, good evening, and welcome to this event. My name is Hannah Trevarthen. I'm Events and Partnerships Manager at English Pen, and I'm extremely delighted to be able to chair this discussion with Long Litt Woon and Zakiya Mckenzie. I feel like a lifetime of running through open spaces and forests and as a bit of a country bumpkin, everything is finally coming together, especially as I feel like we're in a special edition of Winter Watch with all of our plants around us. And I can finally talk about delicious puffball mushrooms when you chop them up and fry them in butter. And I spent a lot of my time as a child poring over Roger Phillips' guides to mushrooms, trees, and flowers. So thank you for indulging me. I'm going to introduce these authors and then they're going to read. So Long Litt Woon is an anthropologist and certified mushroom expert, born in Malaysia and living in Norway. In 2017, she published a book about the two interconnected journeys, an outer journey to the kingdom of fungi and an inner journey of the landscape of grief. The result is this book, The Way Through the Woods, which is published by Scribe and translated into English by Barbara Dre Haviland and with illustrations by Una Vizcan. And I just want to show you some of the illustrations because they're so beautiful. So you can see them up here. I've not labelled them because you need to think about what they are, but also buy the book and you'll find out what they are. And then, there, I'll leave it.
Or someone please take a picture.
So yeah, have a think about what they might be. Zakiya Mckenzie is a graduate student in literature at the University of Exeter and has a long-standing relationship with storytelling. The two interests came together in 2019 when she was chosen as writer-in-residence for the Forestry Commission of England to celebrate its centenary. She holds an MRes in Environment, Energy and Resilience from the University of Bristol. Zakiya is a volunteer at Umjima 98 FM, which plays some really awesome reggae. I was listening to your show. It's really good. And is a Green and Black ambassador, bringing connections between people from ethnic minority backgrounds living in Bristol and the city's booming environmental sector. So please give them a warm welcome. So I'm now going to invite you to read. Who wants to read first? We didn't plan this. That was. Woon, would you like to go first?
Sure. As Hannah was saying, this book is about two journeys. My discovery of the world, the kingdom of fungi, and my wanderings in the landscape of grief. So I think I will start with death. This is the story of a journey which started on the day when my life was turned upside down. The day when Eolf went to work and didn't come home. He never came back. Life as I had known it was gone in that instant. The world would never be the same again. I was devastated. The pain of my loss was all that was left of him. It tore me apart. But I had no wish to dull the agony with painkillers. I wanted to suffer every ounce of the torment, raw. It was confirmation that he had lived, that he had been my husband. I did not want that to be gone as well. I was in free fall. I, who had always been in command and in control. I, who liked to have a firm grip on things. My lodestar was gone. I found myself in unknown territory, a reluctant wanderer in a strange land. Visibility was poor, and I had neither map nor compass. Which way was up? Which way was down? From which corner should I start walking? Where should I set my foot? There was nothing but blackness. And then, of course, I found mushrooms. So I'll read you a little passage about how and why I got hooked on mushrooms. Gathering mushrooms is both a tactile and a sensory experience. First, you feel the degree of resistance in the mushroom. Some stubborn fungi dig in their heels. Others are ready to leave the forest and come home with us if we merely smile sweetly at them. I love the moment when, after a little careful grubbing about, I finally have my golden prize in my hand. To me, it feels almost like scraping my way to the winning number on a scratch card. A cheap thrill. One thing is the mastery that comes with more knowledge and more practice in exploring a forest. Something else, and quite unexpected, is the feeling of euphoria. My heart leapt the first time I found a delicious edible mushroom on my own. Was this happiness? It was staggering to feel an emotion I thought had gone for good when Ayof died. It was like being given an intravenous shot of multivitamins. What a sensation. Elation bubbled out of every cell in my body. All at once, a slender golden beam of light pierced my soul. Find one mushroom, and there's a good chance that you will find another nearby. The thrill of discovery is cumulative. One mushroom, one delight. Two mushrooms, double delight. So I just have a last short passage for you here. And it is more the quiet type of joy that I find in the forest. The question of where to find mushrooms can be answered in 3 short words: in the forest. But such an answer is of no help to a poor lay person who is interested in learning more. If you don't want to give away your GPS details, but would still like to help, it's best to say something like, go for a walk in a nearby forest. As you meet the forest, and the forest meets you, try to leave behind all the hurly-burly of daily life and concentrate instead on tuning in to the rhythm and frequency of the forest. Let that become a part of you. Then you will relax, your pulse will slacken, and you will slip into gathering mode. Listen to the chorus of the birds. Smell the essential odors of the forest, the blend of dark earth and delicate floral notes. Feel the soft mossy carpet under your feet. Nibble on a wood sorrel leaf and feel your appetite instantly quicken. Then look down and turn all your attention to the lush forest floor in all its 100 shades of green, moss, lichen, bracken, and leaves. Bring your mushroom gaze into focus and gradually home in on the details. Is that another shade of green there? Is there something hiding under those dry brown leaves, peeking shyly out at you?
Thank you.
Okay, I will also start with death on this one. So I live in Bristol and my local woods are called Lee Woods. And so this is, I'm going to read 2 pieces and they both happen in Lee Woods. And so this one is called Memories Live in the Forest. My mother died before I knew myself as British. When my only recollections were still those of Jamaica, my tangible ties, in my mind, to the country of my birth were the friends and family who flew to the island to stay at my home in Kingston. England was the richly lilted Guyanese accent of Auntie Greer against the London-born accent of her daughters. Phrases, call and responses that my sister and I still speak of to this day. England was Uncle Liam, thick Yorkshire twang, asking for a cup of tea, sitting in the sun, sweating and sipping from the steaming mug. My England was my unreasonable obsession with the Spice Girls, Emma in particular, learning all of her parts and dressing like her, thanks to the platform shoes and the baby doll dresses and the matey bags given to me by my older cousin Michelle, who lived in Port Antonio, Portland, Jamaica, and was always ahead of the style curve. Removed from the place itself, this is how my England was constructed. England was little Niall declaring, "I'm not 5, I'm 5.5," as he climbed the outside grill with ease and ran barefoot among Julie mango, East Indian mango, and a special pongonut tree. No matter who came, we would always go to the countryside because this is where my mother's family live, my family. I didn't know it then, but my mother's England was much richer. She left rural Jamaica to a strange country in the pit of winter. She came to know more about South London than she did about the island of her birth. It was Tulse Hill, Brixton, working at Sabar Bookshop. She was Lover's Rock, rock steady, rocking crested at 12 Tribes reggae sessions, this time more South London than Global South. I feel such a sense of longing when I am in these places now, wanting her to show me the landscape, the places that still remain. I am wanting that part of my mother that I do not know and never cared for until I myself became an adult and saw how much there is about her I will never know as I see in my child's eyes and the things he will never know about me. And what is my England now? Places where I am sure she never saw, yet places that still stood in her time. Leigh Woods is the kind of place to get lost in and think about these things. The slow rustling of bush and bird above me bring ease, fresh inhale. There is so much that is special here to see. Come and see Bristol white beam trees, Sorbus bristolenius. It only grows wild here in this Avon Gorge, in my Leigh Woods. These glorious trees take precedence here. In fact, it's the best place in the world to see a variety of white beam, trees you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere else in the world. They are old, and I like old, because old means it stood when my mother stood, and so I hold on to it, for it holds the memory. Another namesake, Bristol Rock Cress. The furthest back in time you'll find it is here in my Leigh Woods, my Avon Gorge. The peregrine falcon nests here around the cavey ridge, and cliff hooks show that climbers brave the precipice for another kind of thrill. The strawberry tree, strong and sprouting high over the old quarry, a wonder for a tree hunter to find. There is a treacherous trail to see this beauty, but it is certainly rewarding. With careful shuffling, when I do see it, it is shedding its skin to expose a smooth brown underneath. Yet the skin crunches away, and I feel the crispy outer layer fall off. It is gone from the living tree, dust to dust, ashes to ashes. The steadfast trunk holds the branches reaching out to me. It sheds skin and drops to dirt. I feel tied to the old dirt. I am tethered to the movement of living things here, for I walk with them and think how close my mother was many decades ago when the same place still stood under the sky. The woods hold a surety for me. It is here to witness lives untold, and still it holds the memory. I'll just leave it at that one. Thank you.
Thank you for your beautiful readings. Shall we start with grief and Forrest? Both of you, well, Woon, you wrote a whole book about it. And Zakiya, that was just an amazing reading about about how you find yourself out of time but connecting with your family. I wonder if you could kind of expand on that, how Woon, kind of for you, discovering the joy of mushrooming helped you navigate this pathway, and for you, Zakiya, how coming back to England and being in these forests helped you feel more connected with your history.
Yeah, well, my husband died very suddenly, and that just whacked me off my tracks. And one of the things that happened too was, I think all my senses were like dulled and numbed. I was like in a coma in a way. But going into the forest, woke me up from this sleep, because when you go into the forest and you come from the city, you go into the forest, the first thing that, everything strikes you at the same time as being completely different. You don't have all the noise and the sounds of the city. Suddenly you hear birds' song, you hear silence, the rustling of the leaves. You see a lot of green. You're walking on this mossy carpet. You're smelling, new smells, fresh forest smells. And so that's the setting. And when you start mushrooming, you really have to, re-engage all your senses again, because what's important when you mushroom is, of course, to identify the mushrooms. And if you want to identify the mushrooms, you certainly have to use, all your senses, but also your sense of smell. And I have a whole chapter about that, because I found that very difficult. I was trying to sort of get to grips with it. So basically, you pick up this mushroom, you bring it up to your nose, you turn it around, upside down, and you sniff it, So all your senses get bombarded again. So it's basically go into this space where, you definitely wake up a different person.
Robert Macfarlane says in The Wild Places that forests are places of correspondence, of call and answer, and I really get that from what you have both been reading and are saying.
Yeah, I think definitely for me it's a place of communication and very much about communication with self. So a lot of my forest visits have been on my own, and one thing I learned about myself is I talk to myself a lot and kind of out loud too. So I developed this thing where I would speak to myself and then don't think I'm really strange, but then answer myself as if I was a tree or whatever I was passing around. And so there would be this dialogue that kind of always happened. And I think in a very cathartic, therapeutic way, it was me speaking through kind of a lot of the issues I live with every day. One is the grief, the passing of my mother, and owning, kind of coming back to the country where she grew up well after the age where she would have, been here. And so I think it was, and I will never know that London, because I think that the landscape of London itself has changed. So she'll never be here to show me that London. But I think being in the forest, especially my local forest, Lee Woods, and kind of the ones around Bristol, because they're so close to home and I kind of know where I am. Because I already felt home in the city, I felt home in these very close places to me once I got to be around them. And I live a very busy life in the city, single mom, PhD student, kind of all over the place. And so these are places where I could actually just be nothing and everything at once. I could be out there and I'm nothing and no one expects anything of me, but everything as well. And I think for me, that was really great to have these spaces where I could go close to home as well. I think that was an important part for me, close to home, and be able to just let it out, whether it was crying or laughing. There were so many different things that I came to in it. And probably the number one thing was communication, and it was kind of communing with myself. And, like I said, I'm tied to the dirt. It was communing with the very natural things around me and things that are inanimate that for me spoke to me, or I was speaking through them. And I think in the work that I produce as part of the collection for Forestry England, a lot of the beings become animate. I have a story about the trees talking amongst themselves, learning about climate change. And I think because it was just a very loud place to me of things happening and talking to each other.
And actually, you say that, Woon, about mushrooms as you listen to the sounds like the pop when you kind of cut a particular mushroom.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to pick up on, which you said about your kind of Miley woods, and actually, Woon, in here you talk about the kind of slightly territorial nature of mushrooming. And you're like, somebody says, oh, I found that, where did you find them? In Oslo. Like, you're not going to give away your secret places. So I love the idea that you have this just for you. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Even though my husband was Norwegian, he was not a big hiker, So I was very happy with that, because then I did not have to do this religious ritual every Sunday. The Norwegians are out in the woods, So he dies, and by chance, I start mushrooming, and that takes me into the woods. I've lived there for very many years, and this is foreign territory to me. And in the beginning, I didn't go alone. I was very afraid of getting lost, and I have gotten lost before in the woods. It's not a fun thing. But gradually, I got to know some spots, some secret spots were given to me, so they became mine too. So in a sense, I started creating this map of, my mushroom places, my forests, which were good places to go to, because I thought about the mushrooms as not, I liked them because they didn't talk back to me. They let me be. But your mushrooms are very noisy.
Very noisy.
Interesting. Maybe I should listen harder. Yeah. No, so when I was grieving, this was a good place to go because nobody expected anything of me, and I could be there and just leave when I wanted to. So with time, I became at home too in the forest. Yeah.
And I love the kind of the trust that within the mushroom community, that like after a period of time, then you're kind of shown the secret spots, and that feels very special actually. As you are going through this journey, there's like another level of belonging. You kind of have been entrusted with this.
Yeah, because they talk about mushroom friendships.
Yeah.
And if you're a really good mushroom friend, maybe you will show me your spot, Yeah.
So I think for me it was very important to kind of own Lee Woods, which is again our local wood. Now, very embarrassingly, when I started this kind of writer's residency, and the article that came out in The Guardian starts with the fact that I couldn't find the woods, and that I was at the wrong side of town, and had to take a taxi from the wrong side of town to the forest. Very embarrassingly, that's how this wonderful article starts in The Guardian. But it was very true, and it kind of highlighted one of the points that I bang on in a lot of my other work, is that these are spaces that are often not accessible easily, and you can live in the city of Bristol, inner city Bristol, for your whole life and never go to to Lee Woods. It's on the edge of Clifton, which is the richest part of our city, and I live in the ward that happens that it's the. There's this disparity in Bristol that is really sickening. It's 8 minutes train ride from Lawrence Hill to Clifton, but there's 9 years life expectancy between these two areas, right? And people from Lawrence Hill, and I work in this area, don't get to Lee Woods and don't get to this forest. And I think it was very important for me as somebody from the area and as somebody who does this work of trying, one of my gigs is just getting people and just bringing them to the forest, and we hang out and we write some stories, we do a bit of storytelling, we do some photography and stuff. But I think for me it was really important to own this bit of wood. And enjoy it and love it and say, okay, now I no longer, I'm going to go to the wrong side of the city. I know where it is. I know this is my spot where I want to go. And when I first went to, well, not the first time, but I've been back quite a few times since then. And I had another writer who took me out. And we found this, I spoke about it, there's a much longer bit about the strawberry tree, because it's a strawberry tree, which has been, it's in Lee Woods, and no one knows how it's gotten there, and I'm now in this wormhole of trying to figure out where this tree came from, and it goes back to like 1400s of, it's the only time it could have come, to Bristol. And it's kind of, for me, like going and finding something like that most people will not see, because you have to shuffle down on your butt and all, to get to it. It's very treacherous. Health and safety would say, no, don't go there. And I think once I did that, it was kind of like, okay, I've done something a little bit extraordinary to find this thing that most people don't know. So in a way, it's a bit snobbish, because it's like, this is mine now because I have done the work to get to it and find it. But it's also, it was kind of like to say that no newspaper article will ever be written about me and this wood again, in a way to define it as my own.
I love that. Shuffling around on your bum.
It really was. I have a video of it. It really was.
I want to pick up about what you were saying about the kind of interlinking between like the urban and the rural, or the natural. And Woon, in The Way Through the Woods, I love how it's like peppered with these encounters where you find mushrooms in the city of Oslo, so outside a hospital, and then also you talk about like in New York as well. And Zakiya, I would like you to talk a bit more about kind of how you are working with getting people into these environments. I think if you'll allow me to quote from the seminal film Jurassic Park, life finds a way. I love Jurassic Park.
Well, just continuing on Jurassic Park, some of these mushroomers, they like to say, where there's life, there are mushrooms. So yes, I do write about mushrooming in Central Park and lots of other places. And that was also part of my journey, this grieving journey to sort of, so finding new places to mushroom brought me to new, I traveled in a new way, right? And, but yes, I mean, a lot of people think that mushrooms, you can only find them in the forest. And of course you can find them in the forest, but you can find them anywhere, and also in town, in the city, and I'm sure in London, in the midst of London too. When I was in Madrid, launching my book in Spanish, someone from the publishing house, very happily came into the office with this super poisonous, deadly mushroom that he found in the parking lot. Just outside, He came and, because on the table they had put up some, croissants and sweets and stuff like that. And then there was this mushroom, and I saw it, I said, where did you find this? This is just outside the office. So, yeah, there are poisonous mushrooms and there are very delicious mushrooms. But the thing is that the work is to get to know your mushrooms, because a lot of people fear mushrooms, and rightly so, because there are some very deadly mushrooms. But the point is that once you know what they are, and once you are sure and confident of picking some others, that fear just disappears, because and this new world just opens up, So I've been walking past these mushrooms, delicious and deadly, without knowing what they were, and then now I go into the forest and I know exactly what they are. So you see things in a different way, in a way. Yeah.
Can I just interject before you say, would you explain to the audience, in case they don't know, what a mushroom inspector is, because I've spoken about it and I realised that these wonderful people might not know that it's a thing in Norway.
It is a thing in Norway, and it's very unique to Norway, because I did some research when I was writing this book. So we have this wonderful system where the amateur society of mushroom picking, there is this syllabus that they've developed together with the university, and there is a mushroom exam that you can take. And I have always taken exams in my life, so here I am, suddenly new topic, new exam. Yeah, I'll take this exam. And but actually that exam was very important to me, because when I started this whole business about mushrooming, I didn't have a direction. I was sort of like, life had lost its meaning. Mm-hmm. But the moment I decided to take the exam, suddenly I had direction, But okay, back to this exam. So if you pass this exam, which is 150 mushrooms, then you can take part in this wonderful system we have, where during mushrooming season, the people from the society, this amateur society, would then man little tables at the edge of the forest, so that people who are coming out of the forest with their mushrooms, which they do not know are edible or not, they can just come to you, you check their mushrooms, and then take out the poisonous ones, and then they can go home with a basket full of stuff that they can eat. Yeah, so that's what a mushroom inspector does in Norway.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. About urban and rural. So I'm a part of a project in Bristol called the Green and Black Project, and we kind of very much just get a bunch of people from inner city Bristol and bring them out to farms, woods, and we try to do things that are very close again to Bristol. We started it again because we saw that there was just a lot of fear in young people. So I grew up in Jamaica, where being outside, and my grandmother still lives in rural Jamaica. My grandmother is 91 and still farms, still goes to the market kind of every week, right? And when my family moved back to Jamaica, we didn't have a social circle in Kingston where we lived, so we would be in country all the time. And so I had this life where on the weekends I would be running free and wild, and me and my siblings loved country because it wasn't like town where you couldn't go outside. You had to come in at a certain hour. The cars were on the street, so you couldn't kind of run free. Whereas in country it was very different. We'd leave house in the morning, we'd only go home to eat lunch and then to eat dinner. We'd be with the children of the village, in the river, everywhere. And I just, when I came to Bristol, it was just none of that. Children just didn't have a chance to do that. Just because of the geographies of the spaces that we live in, people didn't do that. And so with the Green and Black Project, we kind of just, as we can, we get a bunch of kids together, and the parents too. In fact, we do family workshops and sometimes just adults, and we go to these green spaces. Lately, we've been doing nature writing and nature photography, I think, with the kind of team that we have and the skills that we have now. And we've also found that is really good, because sometimes when we advertise these trips as just nature trips, we find a lot of the young people don't want to go out because they're worried about messing up their sneakers and I mean, things that when you're a teenager, you think about those things, right? So they don't want to go because they just got new crepe or the jacket and I mean, they're also very real concerns too. They might not have boots to wear out into a very wet, muddy winter. But we trick them and we say, okay, come, this is a photography day out. It just happens to be at this farm. Or we say, come, it's a writing workshop. It just happens to be at this location. And so we have a different few tactics, and it's been going really good now. We have children from about 4 writing poetry. We have teenagers writing nature haikus. We had like Bristol Youth Forum. We have kind of we engage a group of Somali moms to come out with us with their children. And so right now we're just, going out and just bringing people out again to find the things that they love. And a lot of it begins with fear, not wanting to step out, the bugs, the plants, what's poisonous, cow poo, those type of things. And I would say when I knew that there was one time and I said, okay, I know that we've done a good job, is the group of teenage girls, 14, 15-year-olds, and this is our hardest group to engage. The boys, actually. The girls aren't as hard as the boys. Boys, we haven't even gotten out yet. But at least the girls, they come and they're very miserable in the beginning because we say no phones. But even the phones, we find a way to incorporate the phones. So, if you're on Snapchat, do a little bit of reporting. We teach them some reporting skills. Report it as if you were on the radio because the project is out of a community radio station. So we find ways to engage them. And I think my test is always, when we get there, it's always like, I don't want to step there. But you quite always often have one that goes, can we walk through the mud? And when we get that point, about 2 hours, 3 hours in, when someone says, can we walk through the mud, we say, okay. We're done. We did it. We've done what we're supposed to do today. And they're all inner city kids.
Yeah. Mud, glorious mud.
Glorious
There's nothing
mud.
quite like it. Zakiya, what we've just been talking about to me strikes me very much about through Snapchat, and it is about interpretation and translation and getting people to kind of speak a similar language. And with your anthology, which is online on the Forestry Commission, I ask everyone to check that out. There's a poem, or 2 poems actually, which kind of take the title of Fern Ticket. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about kind of local idioms and language which kind of came out of that project. And then I have a question for you, Woon, but I'll do that after Zakiya's answered.
So my favorite forest to visit is the Forest of Dean. So again, it's close to Bristol, but the Forest of Dean is what they call a living, working forest. People have lived there for centuries and people have worked there for a long time. So it's not just one of these manicured forests that is there just to be a forest for people to go and kind of enjoy for well-being. Okay, well-being is really important, but I think that kind of, this idea of happiness and kind of relaxation that we have at the forest kind of shades a lot of the things, the other reasons why people go there. Grief, some people go to forests to commit suicide, and some, we have these very sad stories sometimes that we don't hear on the mainstream, but at the Forest of Dean, a lot of people go there to have sex. And so through the communities of the Forest of Dean, there is this tradition of this thing called the Fern Ticket. Now, it is a very local thing. You don't know it unless you go there. There's you think it's just the name of the pub. But apparently in the Forest of Dean, because there is a pub called the Fern Ticket, it is controversial as well. And I almost feel, in a way I feel like I'm an imposter doing this because it's a thing that people in the Forest of Dean do not like to speak about. Older people don't actually like to speak about it. So the Fern Ticket was, when you had your first sexual experience in the forest, you would receive your Fern Ticket. Or, so if someone was speaking about a Fern Ticket, it would usually be about sex in the forest. And it is a very real thing. There is a card, you can go and put your names on it, and you bring it to a person who only exists in the Forest of Dean called the Gaviler. He doesn't exist for the sex record, but he does keep a record, if you so like, of people who have had sex, if you've had sex in the Forest of Dean. Your name can be on a record, and the record stretches back to 1700s as far as, yes. And there's no kind of, the only thing is that it has to be the first time and it has to be 2 people. So it's really, yeah, so if there were 3 of you, someone is left off. And I think it's actually very progressive though, because they didn't kind of make any, there was no like you had to be heterosexual or anything. It could be anybody as long as there were just 2 people. And so I wrote this poem called The Fern Ticket, much to the chagrin of some of the people who live there, but other people really, really love it because it's this very local thing that you never know unless you live there. And people don't speak about it that much. And it happens kind of, as a forester, we think about it as places where we go to hide some of the things that we do. But actually in this and this is why I love the Forest of Dean, because it's kind of like, okay, yeah, you did it in the hiding place, but come, we have a list, we have a long record by this man who exists for 2 reasons. Is one for minors and then, to have this kind of record of sex in the forest. And so I've written like these 2 poems, and the first one is very popular, and the second one it is not as popular, but I definitely wrote it for it to be kind of really really romantic and kind of almost cheesy as a kind of, Mills and Bones or something kind of really cheesy, but you couldn't tell the time or the place because, as I said, it's been happening for you could tell the places in the forest, but you couldn't tell the time. I tried because it's something that happens for a very long time. And I mean, the Forest of Dean is very strange because, as I said, you could go and get your name in, but actually only if you were born in the Forest of Dean will anyone recognize your Fern ticket. Otherwise, you spent it for no reason.
Who needs the Mile High Club when
Exactly.
we can get our Fern ticket?
In fact, that's what we've said. It's the forest version of the Mile High Club, actually. Yeah.
Don't really know where to go from that. Woon, I want to ask you about language and translation and speaking the same language, because there's a chapter in the book about Latin names for mushrooms and fungi. There's some tussles in there about what names, and like you can be talking about the same mushroom but come from different places. Can you talk a bit about that? Like, we all might call one thing the same thing, but it's got the same Latin name, but it might be kind of locally different.
Yeah. Yes. There's a chapter on mushroom Latin in the book, and the reason why it's there is because for the mushroom exam in Norway, you just need to know the Norwegian common names. You do not need to know the Latin names or the scientific names. And I was very pleased when I heard that because, I mean, there's a lot to learn. This is a huge field. It's dynamic. It's changing all the time. Mushrooms are changing, families and things like that. So because of all this DNA analysis. So I was very happy when I did not have to, study Latin too for the exam. But when I started moving around and mushrooming in other places, and even if I went to Denmark or Sweden just next door, they would have different common names for the same mushroom. So unless you know the scientific name, you would not know what you're talking about. And that's number one. And the other thing is, of course, the internet, where, the source of, a lot of information. So if you want to go, if I wanted to find out more about a particular mushroom, I would need to know its scientific name. So thank God I had a mentor, in Latin, one of these grand old men in the mushrooming society. And he decided to take me under his wing and taught me mushroom Latin. And that was great because that gives a new dimension, to learning, to identifying the mushroom. Then suddenly some things make more sense, because of course all these are descriptive, they would, tell you about the color of the mushroom or various things about the mushroom. So yeah, I loved it in the end.
Do you have a favourite Latin name for a mushroom?
Well, there are two parts to a name to a mushroom name. So first you would have the group name, and the thing is, and then the personal name is I think of it as a personal name. The name of the mushroom itself would be the second word. Do I have a favorite? No, not really. But the thing is, I just came from Malaysia this morning, and of course, when I'm there, people like to send me now pictures of mushrooms. My editors from all over the world, they are going to work, but they see a mushroom and they send the picture to me. And so in Malaysia, we do not have, unfortunately, this amateur society there. It's all, of course, people know about mushrooms, but it's all at the university. So there aren't any sort of there's no book I can buy, to look up mushrooms and common names for mushrooms. But when I see a mushroom there, I can tell you the surname, which group does this belong to, but I will not be able to identify the particular mushroom in question. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. And I thought I'd ask a big question at the end. So one of the kind of themes that has been running through the season is about threats to home. And I think when you talk about nature and the forest, you cannot not talk about climate change. And, you know, we're existing in two homes, really. The Earth is our home and then our other home, as it were. Zakiya, I read an interview with you in which you talk about a proverb that your mother used to say, which is, "One day feeding can't fatten horse." So I want to kind of ask you both about climate change. What can we do on an individual basis? How can we make a difference, do you think?
Whew, a big one.
Take a deep breath.
So one, I think, definitely for me, I think I am doing a bit of I'm doing my part when we gather up people and bring them out and try to foster in them a love for the environment as well. And so the more people who kind of love and know what we have to lose, it's the more of us who protect it, I would hope. And so with the young people and very young people that we take out, and this is something we talk about quite often. Hopefully, I think that's one way in which I'm doing my little bit there. But I kind of generally, and I say quite often, a lot of the things that we do in the Caribbean and kind of in places of the global South, we kind of did them because we needed to. We were recycling, we were handing down clothes, we were doing the little kitchen garden, we were doing these things. We were eating out of calabashes, which are, gourd. So we were and have been doing these things sometimes out of necessity or because these were the resources that we had. So, one of the ways that I kind of do the work that I do is actually saying, like, these are things that have been in existence for a long time. And maybe what needs to happen is that where we are in the North or in Western countries is to look more to countries who have been living with kind of precarity for a long time and environmental precarity and learn from some of the things that those people and groups are doing as well. And I bang on about that a lot. I think it's not that black and brown people are not involved in nature and sustainability. It's actually that the establishment or the movements or the systems aren't looking or coming to those communities to learn anything, really.
Thank you.
In Denmark, there's this mushroom called the Satan mushroom. And it is not found in Norway. And the mushrooms have just been waiting for it to come. It is a huge red, mushroom, and it's poisonous. And I just heard that it has been observed now in the south of Norway. And this is a bad sign. This is a bad sign because the reason why it has not been in Norway so far is because of the climate and the temperature. And so, for the mycologists, this mushroom of Satan, has been is the sign that something is really changing in the climate. I haven't had it confirmed, but I just heard that it has been observed. So things are definitely happening, not nice things, right? And I agree with you, Zakiya, that in a way, maybe if you knew about something, if you knew more about nature, if you had a personal connection with it, if you know that joy can be had in nature, maybe that would make you think a bit more about the connection, between your lives and the life that is out there that needs to sustain planet Earth, I don't want to be to tell people what to do, but definitely if if you have not been in the forest before, maybe it's high time to do it, you know. Maybe not on your own, because I understand that it's a huge step. If you know, I was afraid of the forest. You need to sort of find your motivation. So if you like food and you like, you know, your porcinis, you know, they are in the forest too, you know. You just need to find a friend who would show them to you, and yeah, find joy in nature.
Find joy in nature. That's a great phrase. I think if you live in, just talking about finding joy in mushrooms, I think if you live within the vicinity of Cambridge University, they do some like mushroom walks, so you can check those out as well. I'd like to open it up to the audience because I'm sure you all have questions. If you do have a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you because it's being filmed. So, any questions? Ooh, here, right at the front. Just going to change the slide to a different mushroom.
Oh, wow.
Can you not film me?
Yeah, no filming for this, please.
I was wondering, how did you find out? I've been to the Forest of Dean and I don't know about I'm like, how did you find out?
The Forest of Dean was a bit different when I went because it was the first time I went, it was a hosted trip. So I had, there's a project called Reading the Forest. They kind of showed me around and they showed me that and kind of introduced me to a lot of the other people who had written about the Forest of Dean. And there's also another project called Forest Dialect, which is a lot more about the language in the Forest of Dean. And that's run by a lady called Dr. Michelle Straw, and I actually had a few sessions with her to kind of mentoring or kind of editing, writing help sessions with her. And so they gave me a lot of the history of the Fern Ticket. But the moment they told me about it, I thought, oh, I'm definitely writing about it. So everyone just started giving me all the information about it.
One at the back here.
Thank you. It was really fascinating conversation here. I suppose one thing that hasn't been talked about is the idea of the sacredness and ritual aspects of certain aspects of mushrooms. And I suppose I'm a South London kid, grew up in South London, but I went to college in the 80s in a middle of nowhere town in the heart of West Yorkshire on the moors. And day two, a kid from not far from Bristol, sort of in that sort of southwest England area, said, let's go picking magic mushrooms. So we went onto the moors, and within about 10 minutes we found some magic mushrooms and ingested them, and wow, quite an amazing experience. So I'm just thinking about the sort of aspects of that danger but also sacredness of mushrooms, and also how it does how some mushrooms, fly agaric being another one, which is used by certain tribes or from the sort of parts of northern Europe to kind of have hallucinatory experiences. And did you guys ever take any hallucinogenic mushrooms?
I should say there's a chapter in the book about this, which is really fascinating. And you talk about, like, they don't have it in the books about, so you do a little bit of delving into Norwegian mushroom politics, I think.
Yes, there is a whole chapter about it in the book. Not about, you know, the experience of ingesting magic mushrooms, but I'm an anthropologist, so I do not only write about the mushrooms I got to know, but also the mushroom people, this tribe of mushroom collectors, you know, mushroom pickers. And one of the things, as I was studying for this exam, one of the things that struck me was suddenly one day I found that I saw a picture of this magic mushroom, and it's not on the syllabus, by the way. And I was thinking, why is this mushroom not on the syllabus? This is what everyone wants to know about, you know? And so I asked the elders, you know, the seniors, and they were shocked that I even wanted to know more about it.
Really?
Yeah, and immediately they told me, oh, you know that you can fall into a coma and never wake up again? I said, oh, I didn't know that. But that was said to frighten me off, but that just made me more interested in it. So I worked very hard to try to get people who would talk to me, and this is illegal in Norway. So, well, finally, I managed to find some informants, you know, who took me mushrooming for magic mushrooms, showed me the magic mushrooms that were growing in the kitchen. And so I write about that, you know, experience. Yeah.
I won't ask you, Zakiya, if you've ever taken part in a sacred mushroom ritual.
I haven't, but I do want to. I do want to.
Yeah, but on a serious note, I mean, Michael Pollan has written now this book with this wonderful title, How to Change Your Mind or something. Yeah, and there he describes this trips that he has taken. You know, 3 trips. You know, one of it is with the magic mushroom. He's super serious, and he talks about what it does and how it changed his life and his relationship to his wife too. So maybe you should consider that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's what's amazing in the chapter that you talk about is one of the people that you speak to is about how that experience sort of has quite like literally, well, not literally expanded his mind, they would have a giant brain, but how it's changed their perception on the world and how that has felt quite special to them.
Yes, and what they all talk about is this connection to nature and being part of nature, being part of time. And one of them whom I talk to, and whom I write about in the book, actually say something like what he said in the beginning, how he felt that, his grandfather, his great-grandfather has seen these same trees too. You know, you feel, you know, like you are part of something larger than yourself. Yeah.
Any more questions? Just here?
Hi, Woon. Hi, Zakiya. You both talk about your grief as well. Do you think do you think going into the forest and then writing about your grief, did that get you over it? Really, was that, you know? What am I trying to say? Yeah, that's it. Really, just, you know, was that? Did you have to get it down as well? Did you have to write about it to you know exercise it exactly?
I definitely didn't expect to write about it. And I think with this collection, I didn't expect to write so much about myself and my identity and belonging and kind of, I didn't expect at all for it to be so biographical, but it is what came. And I kind of couldn't ignore these bits that kept coming up about my mother and kind of recognizing myself as British as well, which would have been, you know, for me, you know, we switched. I would first think of myself as Jamaican up until up until recently. Whereas for her, she would have probably thought of herself as British first. You know, she only moved back to Jamaica when we were children after moving here at age 8. So I think, I don't think it's gonna stop for me anytime soon, because as I visit more of these forests, I think I always kind of go back to, you know, I have this parallel thing running in my head of what would British raised Zakiya have been like. And I think I always think about that in the forest, and that inevitably brings me back to my family, and then it brings me back to the death of my mother. And so I don't know if I'm gonna stop writing about it. I think actually I have a lot more of dealing with that. That's probably going to come as I visit more of the forests.
A lot of people have asked whether, you know, it has been part of this grieving process, whether I wrote for its therapeutic function, you know. And I didn't do that because I started out, the book started out, you know, by being a quirky, personal book about mushrooms and mushrooming people. That was what it was about. And halfway through that process, I was wondering, you know, where am I going to put my husband in the book? Because in my mind, definitely, you know, there is a connection between mushrooming and mourning, and that I was saved by the mushrooms, you know. And I was struggling to find a format, a way to write about it, and I didn't know how to do it. And then I thought, okay, I'll just start. I just started writing about my loss of him, and then it just came, and then I knew immediately that this was not only a mushroom book, you know, that's why it's of mushrooms and mourning, you know, so it's a book about grief too. And the interesting thing is that, yes, it has been good for me to write, because grieving for me was a very chaotic kind of process, you know, everything was just thrown upside down, helter-skelter. So writing helped me organize my thoughts, my narrative, definitely. And the interesting thing is, okay, this book has come out now in 14 editions, and I've been all over the place talking about it, and people would ask me questions, and sometimes I'll get a question I haven't been asked before, and then you know, something falls into place too. So this whole healing process for me of writing, it's ongoing, and it's continuing even after the book has come out. Yeah.
I think that's all we've got time for. As you've been speaking, you both kind of have spoken about like the joy and the wonder of nature, and there's a quote that I'd like to end on, which is from Nan Shepherd and her book The Living Mountain, which says, "However often I walk on them, these hills hold astonishment for me. There's no getting accustomed to them." So what I would take away from this event is go out into the forest, connect with it, find the joy and the wonder, and yeah, learn more about the amazing planet that we're on. I hope you will all give a round of applause to these two wonderful writers for sharing their personal experiences with us, and thank you for coming.